Recently, I created a video where I use mixed media collage on a scrapbook layout. Today, I'm using scraps from some mixed media collages that I made in order to make some greeting cards. Come check it out next on the Victoria Marie YouTube channel. Welcome back to the Victoria Marie YouTube channel, where I feature all things scrapbooking and crafting. If that's something you enjoy, make sure you click the subscribe button. And when you do, click the bell. That way you'll be notified each and every time a new video is posted. Today I am making a greeting card using some mixed media collages that I created using my jelly plate, some acrylic paints, stencils, as well as some texture paste. Now, I demonstrated how to do this in my last video where I used some of these collages, or at least pieces of these collages, on a scrapbook layout. So from that video, here's a little bit of that footage. Is me making some examples of how I put together these mixed media collages using some very simple tools. Now, you don't need a jelly plate in order to do this. In fact, you can create all kinds of designs on any substrate that you want. But the idea here is that you create some of these mixed media collages using materials that you have on hand, cutting them up and using them for various projects. This is a really good way to get some versatility and some utility out of the products you already have on hand. And I know a lot of us collect mixed media products and we don't ever use them. So here's an example of some of the mixed media collages that I made a couple of weeks ago. Actually, I just had a session where I made a ton of these, and then what you can do from there is cut them up and use them for a variety of projects. So you can see all that beautiful rich texture, the color, the pattern that you can easily achieve by using acrylic paint. You can use a jelly plate if you want to. That's to make mono prints. You can use your stencils and your roller stamps and all kinds of fun things to create really awesome patterns. You can even use regular everyday household items like toothbrushes and bubble wrap to make impressions in your mono print. So I'm showing you some cards that I've made, and these are featured on my Instagram. So if you haven't visited me on Instagram, make sure that you do. So the idea is to use these mixed media collages in creative ways on your projects, whether they're scrapbook layouts or cards. Here I'm showing you some examples of cards that I made. I simply trimmed down my mixed media collages, say that fast 10 times. I trimmed them down to whatever my preferred card size is, and then of course added those to a card base, added some sentiments using dies and such from my stash, and I have instant mixed media cards that are ready to go. And then whatever leftover mixed media collage papers that I have that I made, I can use them for other projects. So here's one that I paired with a frame. Here's another one that I paired with a sentiment. This is from CZ Design from Simon Says Stamp, Kathy Zilski. Look how awesome that is, all that texture, all that color. And what's so awesome is that each of the prints that you make are going to be different. They're going to be unique to your own design style, and also subject to just something completely random, which is awesome. So today I'm going to be making this card. In fact, the heart's going to look slightly different because I'm going to be using some strips of the print collages that I made. I'm also going to be using some dies from my stash. I have this nested stitch heart die from Catherine Puller. I also have the sentiment die from CZ Design for Simon Says Stamp, and then I have a Sizzix die that has the flowers and the foliage that I'll be using on this card. All these things from my stash. Then I also reached in my stash to find my little Cuttlebug embossing folder. I must have bought that at Michael's a couple of years ago, and that's going to add some texture to the panel. I'm also going to use those collage papers, cut them up into strips. It doesn't matter what size. You can make them as thin or as thick as you want to, but the idea here is to create a really fun composition on your card. I also have the sentiment die cut. I'm going to use this solid cardstock. It's a blue solid cardstock for the base, and then of course a piece of white cardstock for the panel. So let's go ahead and get started with the card. First things first, once you create your mixed media collage, then you just want to trim it down based on the project you're making. And so for this, I wanted stripes, or strips rather. So I'm cutting them down, doesn't matter the size. You could maybe do them about 1/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch, however big or small you want to. Maybe you want to vary the sizes for a unique composition. Once I have those cut out, I'm just going to take a piece of scrap white cardstock. I like to keep a bunch of scraps around for this purpose. And what I'm going to do is just start laying them out in a horizontal fashion. I could lay them out in a vertical fashion, or I can lay them out in a diagonal fashion. I can even leave this straight without punching it out with a heart die, which you're going to see me do. See, look how beautiful that panel is. You could just trim that up on the side, make that an A2 card base, and call it a day. Put a sentiment on it. I mean, just how beautiful is that? And what I want to do was alternate those strips so that I have a slightly different design for each strip as I go down. I'm going to take my die, adhere that straight to the, or on top of that mixed media collage strips that I cut out, and I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. Now, you do want to make sure that you're applying enough pressure, depending depending on the type of cardstock that you're using. If you're using thinner cardstock, no problem. I used some mixed media paper on this, so it had a little bit of trouble running through my die, but I actually got it to work. Look at all that beautiful texture. You can see the stitch from the stitch border die there. I mean, just fantastic. I'm also going to die cut another heart that I'm going to lay behind the mixed media just to give it a little bit more of a layered look. I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine and punch that out. Now, you can use your punches if you want to. You can use your dies if you want to. You can just leave it as it is and trim the sides of the card. Completely up to you. But I like utilizing what I have on hand. I have so many of those nested dies and so many punches, so I want to use them. So once I have that in place, I'm going to go ahead and die cut all the rest of the materials that I need. So I have 3 colors of pattern paper: green for the leaves, blue for the flowers, and then yellow is going to be for the little dots that go in the middle of the flowers, which you'll see after a while. It's kind of hard to tell here. Just going to run that through my die cutting machine. Now, if I'm making multiple cards, then I will do this in sessions. I will do the mixed media collage work first, and then maybe on another day, I will die cut all of the elements that are going to go on a card, and then another day I'll assemble all the cards. I'm continuing the die cutting with my sentiment, so I'm going to do the sentiment itself in blue and then the outline of the sentiment in vellum. This is Hero Arts layering vellum. It is by far my favorite vellum, so I'll make sure to post the link down below. Absolutely love this product. I use vellum on pretty much every project. I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine, cut that out, and what I'll do is I will layer those 2 items together. This particular sentiment was designed by Kathy Zilski. She is a formerly scrapbooker, now card maker. She's been making cards for a few years now, and I just love her clean design. I thought it would work well for this card. Next up, I'm going to trim out my card panel. So I'm going to trim the card panel to 5 by 7. This is actually going to be a rather large card. I wanted to make sure that I had enough space for the heart that I was creating, and I didn't want it to be too small or too big for an A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to go ahead and run that panel through my die cutting machine. I'm going to emboss that using my embossing folder. That embossing folder is called Mosaic. It's from Sizzix. I don't even know if it's still being made, but I love it. It's one of my favorites and my go-to anytime that I'm making cards. I just love that texture. So pretty. Then I'm going to go ahead and make my card base. Typically, I like to pre-make my card panels and my card bases so that I can just reach for it whenever I'm making a card. But this one I want to show you how I made that very simple. Cut that down. I just cut down a piece of cardstock to 10 by 7 and then scored it at 5 inches. I'm going to trim about 1/8 of an inch off of the card, one on the long side, one on the short side, because I want to have a little bit of that blue cardstock of the base showing through as a frame around that panel. Now, once that's all good to go, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the card. So I went ahead and adhered the panel to the card base. I'm going to use some foam tape to pop up the heart on the white layer. That's going to add a little bit of dimension to that. Absolutely love that. Just using a little bit of that foam from scrapbook.com. It's my favorite go-to. I go through a lot of that foam. And then once that's adhered, I'm going to add that to the card. I am glad that I went with that 5 by 7 size because I think on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card, that would have just kind of swallowed that card up. So gave me a little bit of breathing room. Now I'm going to work on the sentiment. I'm going to take the sentiment, the first piece of the sentiment, and stack that on top of a secondary piece I had already had cut. So I thought I would just use it. Plus, if you stack them, then you get some extra dimension without using any foam. I'm going to go ahead and adhere that to the vellum, that Hero Arts vellum, and that's going to give that a shadow effect for the sentiment. Very beautiful, very classy. And it also helps to add a point of delineation if you have a busy background. I'm going to take some foam strips because that heart's popped up. I need to make the sentiment a little sturdy there on the end so it doesn't fall off or bend into the card. So I add a little bit of this thin foam strips that I cut up to the U and the E and went ahead and adhered that to the card. Now here's the fun part that I love is putting all the little elements together. So I have these little flowers, adding some Barely Art glue and adhering those down, one at the top of the flower to the left, one here to the middle right, and then one at the bottom by the sentiment. And that kind of gives it a visual triangle. I'm also going to layer in a blue flower, just kind of stack those flowers. I could, of course, have used foam if I want a little bit of height on the flower, but I do want to be mindful that if I send this to the mail, I don't want it to have too much height because I don't want it to be smushed. Okay, I'm going to add in that foliage, just tucking those in where I think it looks really nice. I'm actually going to fix the bottom part and take off those large leaves and replace that with a smaller leaf, and I think that looks great. I'm going to zhuzh it up a little bit with some, with a glitter pen from Nuvo. by Tonic, and I'm just going to put those on the leaves just to make them sparkle and shine. It's hard to see here on the camera depending on the angle, but in person it's actually very pretty, and that's a great way to get a little bit of shine on your card. So here's the finished project. I just love all that mixed media there in the background. If you give this to somebody, they're going to just think that you are the most artistic person in the world, because you are. It's very simple to make these beautiful mixed media collages and just use them on so many backgrounds. And this is a really easy solution for those who are intimidated by mixed media, or if you bought a lot of products, you can put them to good use to make all kinds of projects. If you have any questions about any of the techniques that I covered in this video, or if you've been inspired to try this out, let me know in the comment section. This is such a fun technique, and I hope that you give it a try. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey, thanks so much for stopping by. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe button. When you do, click the bell. That way you'll be notified each and every time a new video is posted.